They discovered him on a Tuesday morning, sitting peacefully in his favorite leather chair, the newspaper still folded on his lap, reading glasses perched on his nose as if he'd simply dozed off. No struggle, no pain, no call for help. Just the quiet stillness that follows when a life slips away unnoticed. The coroner's report would later state natural causes, but those of us who understand the hidden patterns know there was something deeper at work, a slow, silent collapse that had been building for years. His name was Robert T., and he wasn't alone. Every month, I see the same pattern repeated in medical offices across the country. Men in their 60s and 70s, experiencing a cascade of health problems that seem unrelated on the surface. But when you dig deeper, they all trace back to one simple decision most men make without realizing the consequences. They stop masturbating. Now, before you click away, thinking this is inappropriate or unnecessary, let me be clear about who I am and why this conversation could save your life. I'm Dr. Torres, a board-certified urologist and men's health specialist with over 35 years of clinical experience. I've dedicated my career to understanding the complex relationship between male sexuality and overall health, particularly in men over 60, and what I've discovered will shock you. Over the past 3 decades, I've treated thousands of older men who walked into my office confused, frustrated, and often ashamed. They came seeking help for what they thought were separate, unrelated health issues: erectile dysfunction, chronic fatigue, prostate problems, depression. But as I dug deeper into their medical histories, a pattern emerged that most doctors never discuss and most men never connect. The moment they stopped engaging in regular self-pleasure, their bodies began a slow but devastating decline. This isn't about morality or shame. This is about medical science. This is about understanding that your body doesn't simply retire from sexual function when you turn 60, 70, or 80. When you force it into retirement, serious health consequences follow, consequences that can impact every aspect of your life, from your cardiovascular health to your mental clarity to your very will to live. Today, I'm going to share with you 4 critical health consequences that occur when men over 60 stop masturbating, consequences that most doctors won't discuss and most men discover too late. These aren't theoretical possibilities. These are real, measurable, preventable health problems that I've witnessed firsthand in my practice. But more importantly, I'm going to show you exactly how to prevent them. If you're watching this on the Life After 65 channel, we're committed to having the honest, difficult conversations that can truly impact your health and happiness in your later years. And if this is your first time here, I want you to know that everything I share is backed by decades of clinical experience and peer-reviewed research. So if you're ready to hear the truth about male health after 60, the truth that could protect your vitality for years to come, type 1 in the comments if you're with me, or 0 if you're skeptical. I welcome both, because this is a conversation that every man over 60 deserves to have, without shame and with complete medical honesty. And please stay until the end, because the 4th consequence I'll reveal is the one that even most urologists won't discuss openly, yet it's the one that can most dramatically impact your quality of life and longevity. Let's begin with the first consequence, the one that serves as an early warning system for everything else that follows. 3 months ago, a patient named David sat across from my desk with tears in his eyes. This was a man who had served in Vietnam, raised 4 children, built a successful construction company from nothing. He wasn't someone who cried, "Doc," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't remember the last time I woke up like a man." David was talking about morning erections, what we in the medical field call nocturnal penile tumor. For most of his adult life, he'd awakened with reliable morning arousal. It was as natural as breathing, as predictable as sunrise. Then, sometime in his late 60s, it simply stopped. What David didn't understand, what most men don't understand, is that morning erections aren't just about sexual function. They're a vital sign. They're your body's way of saying, the cardiovascular system is working, the nervous system is functioning, the hormones are flowing. When they disappear, especially suddenly, it's often the first warning sign of a much larger problem. Here's what happens when you stop masturbating after age 60, and why it creates a cascade of vascular problems that can become irreversible. Your penis is not a decorative organ. It's a sophisticated piece of vascular engineering that requires regular blood flow to maintain its health and function. Think of it like any other muscle in your body. If you don't use it, you lose it. But unlike your biceps or your legs, the consequences of losing penile function extend far beyond the bedroom. When you go weeks or months without any form of sexual stimulation, several dangerous things begin to happen simultaneously. First, the smooth muscle tissue in your penis begins to lose its elasticity. Without regular blood flow, these tissues start to develop microscopic scar tissue, a process called fibrosis. Once fibrosis sets in, it's extremely difficult to reverse. Second, the nerves that control erectile function begin to lose their sensitivity. These delicate nerve pathways need regular stimulation to maintain their responsiveness. When that stimulation stops, the nerves essentially go dormant, and reawakening them requires increasingly aggressive intervention. Third, and perhaps most critically, the blood vessels that supply your penis begin to narrow and lose their flexibility. This isn't just a local problem. It's often an early indicator of cardiovascular disease throughout your entire body. Many cardiologists now recognize that erectile dysfunction can be a predictor of heart problems, sometimes appearing years before other cardiac symptoms. I've had patients like David who thought they were being mature or appropriate by giving up sexual activity as they aged. Society tells us that desire should fade, that it's undignified for older men to think about sex. But what society doesn't tell us is that this mindset can cost you your health. David had gone nearly 2 years without any sexual activity, including masturbation. He'd convinced himself he didn't need it anymore, that it was a young man's concern. By the time he came to see me, he couldn't achieve an erection even with medication. The blood vessels had narrowed, the nerves had gone quiet, and the tissues had begun to change in ways that were difficult to reverse. But here's what gave me hope about David's case, and what should give you hope too. The human body has a remarkable capacity for healing when we give it what it needs. We started David on a comprehensive program that included not just medical intervention, but also education about the importance of regular sexual stimulation. Even if it was just self-stimulation once or twice a week. 6 months later, David called me with excitement in his voice. "Doc, I woke up like a 20-year-old this morning." It wasn't just about the physical function returning. It was about feeling alive again, feeling like himself again. The medical research supports what I've seen in my practice. Studies show that men who maintain regular ejaculation throughout their lives have significantly better erectile function, better cardiovascular health, and even lower rates of prostate cancer. This isn't about being obsessed with sex. It's about maintaining a vital, physiological function that impacts your entire body. But morning erections are just the beginning. The second consequence of stopping masturbation affects something even more fundamental to your sense of vitality and well-being. It's something that influences your energy levels, your mood, your physical strength, and your very identity as a man. And when this second system begins to fail, the effects ripple through every aspect of your life in ways most men never connect to their decision to stop engaging in sexual activity. It starts so subtly that most men don't notice it at first. You sleep a little longer, but wake up feeling tired. Your morning coffee doesn't give you the same energy boost. You skip your evening walk because you just don't feel like it. You find yourself sitting more, moving less, caring about fewer things that once brought you joy. Frank was 68 when his wife brought him to my office. She was worried because the man she'd been married to for 42 years was disappearing before her eyes. "He's not sick, exactly," she explained, "but he's not himself. He's like a shadow of the man I married." Frank confirmed her observations with a shrug that spoke volumes. "I just don't have the drive anymore. Doc, I wake up and wonder, what's the point of getting out of bed?" What Frank didn't realize, what most men his age don't realize, is that his emotional and physical decline wasn't just about getting older. His testosterone levels had plummeted, not just from natural aging, but from a complete cessation of sexual activity that had been accelerating his hormonal decline for over 3 years. Here's the truth that most men never hear. Masturbation is one of the most natural and effective ways to stimulate testosterone production in older men. When you engage in sexual arousal and climax, your brain releases a cascade of hormones that signal your body to maintain its masculine vitality. The hypothalamus activates, dopamine levels rise, and your testicles receive a clear message: we still need you to produce testosterone. But when that stimulation stops entirely, when you go months without any form of sexual activity, your body interprets this as a signal that reproduction and masculine function are no longer necessary. It begins to scale back hormone production dramatically. The consequences extend far beyond the bedroom. Low testosterone doesn't just affect your sex drive. It affects your entire identity as a man. Testosterone influences your muscle mass, bone density, mental clarity, emotional stability, and cardiovascular health. When levels drop significantly, men experience what I call the great dimming, a gradual loss of vitality that touches every aspect of their lives. Frank's blood work confirmed what I suspected. His testosterone levels were in the bottom 10th percentile for his age group. But here's what shocked him. This wasn't necessarily normal aging. Men who maintain regular sexual activity, including masturbation, often have testosterone levels 30 to 40% higher than their abstinent counterparts. I've seen this pattern hundreds of times. A man decides he's too old for sexual thoughts or activities. He stops masturbating, thinking it's mature or appropriate. Within months, his energy crashes, his mood flattens, his muscles begin to weaken, and his cognitive function starts to decline. Family members notice personality changes. He becomes more irritable, less engaged, more prone to depression and anxiety. The tragedy is that much of this decline is preventable. Frank was skeptical when I explained the connection between sexual activity and hormonal health. Like many men his age, he'd been taught that masturbation was shameful, something you outgrow. But I showed him the research. Studies from major medical institutions demonstrate that regular ejaculation helps maintain healthy hormone levels throughout a man's life. I also shared with him the story of another patient, a 72-year-old retired teacher named William, who had come to me with similar symptoms. William had maintained regular masturbation throughout his life, about twice a week, even after his wife passed away. At 72, his testosterone levels were higher than many men in their 50s. He was energetic, mentally sharp, physically active, and emotionally resilient. The difference wasn't genetics or luck. It was consistency in maintaining a natural physiological function that his body needed to stay healthy. Frank decided to trust the science, along with some lifestyle modifications and a commitment to regular sexual self-care. We monitored his progress. 3 months later, his wife called me with excitement. "Dr. Torres, I have my husband back. He's building a garden shed, planning a trip to see our grandchildren, and actually laughing at my jokes again." But testosterone decline is just the beginning of the problems that develop when men stop masturbating. The third consequence affects an organ that most men never think about until it starts causing them pain, affecting their sleep, and interfering with one of the most basic human functions. And when this organ becomes inflamed and congested, the discomfort can become unbearable, leading many men to require medical interventions that could have been prevented with something as simple as regular ejaculation. At 3:17 a.m., Thomas was awake again. For the 4th time that night, he found himself shuffling to the bathroom, standing over the toilet, waiting for what felt like an eternity for a weak stream to finally emerge. The burning sensation, the incomplete emptying, the constant pressure in his lower pelvis. It had been building for months, and now it was ruling his life. Thomas was experiencing what millions of older men face: prostate congestion and inflammation, often triggered by prolonged periods without ejaculation. What he didn't know was that his decision 2 years earlier to stop masturbating had set in motion a cascade of problems in an organ most men barely understand. Your prostate is not just a bystander in your reproductive system. It's an active, dynamic gland that produces about 30% of your seminal fluid. This fluid is meant to move, meant to be expelled regularly. When it sits stagnant for weeks or months, it thickens, pressure builds, and inflammation creeps in. Think of your prostate like a sponge that's constantly producing fluid. If you regularly squeeze that sponge through ejaculation, it stays clean, flexible, and healthy. But if you let that fluid accumulate 4 months without release, the sponge becomes heavy, swollen, and eventually infected This is exactly what happened to Thomas. As a urologist, I see this pattern constantly. Men who stop masturbating after age 60 often develop what we call chronic prostatitis, long-term inflammation of the prostate that can be incredibly difficult to treat once it becomes established. The symptoms start gradually. You might notice that your urine stream isn't as strong as it used to be. You wake up more frequently during the night needing to urinate. You feel like your bladder never completely empties. There's a dull ache in your lower back or pelvis that comes and goes. Many men assume these are just normal signs of aging. They're not. When I examined Thomas, his prostate was significantly enlarged and tender to the touch. His PSA levels, a marker that can indicate prostate problems, were elevated. He was facing the possibility of painful procedures, expensive medications, and chronic discomfort that could last for years. But here's what Thomas found hard to believe. Much of his suffering could have been prevented with something as simple as ejaculating once or twice a week. The medical research on this is compelling. A landmark Harvard study followed over 29,000 men for 18 years and found that those who ejaculated 21 times per month had a 20% lower risk of prostate cancer compared to men who ejaculated only 4 to 7 times per month. The theory is that regular ejaculation helps flush potentially harmful substances from the prostate, reducing inflammation and cellular damage. But the benefits go beyond cancer prevention. Regular ejaculation helps maintain healthy prostate size, improves urinary function, and reduces the risk of painful. It's like giving your prostate regular maintenance instead of waiting for it to break down. I shared these findings with Thomas, along with a comprehensive treatment plan that included not just medical interventions, but also education about the importance of regular ejaculation for prostate health. He was resistant at first. Like many men his age, he'd been conditioned to think that masturbation was inappropriate or unnecessary at his stage of life. But desperation is a powerful motivator. The pain, the sleepless nights, the constant worry about cancer. Thomas was willing to try anything that might help. 6 months later, Thomas sent me a note that I still keep in my desk drawer. Dr. Torres, I'm sleeping through the night again. The pain is gone. My PSA is normal, and I feel like I have my life back. Why didn't anyone tell me this 30 years ago? The answer to Thomas's question is complicated. We live in a society that struggles to have honest conversations about sexuality, especially when it comes to older adults. We've created shame around natural bodily functions, and that shame is literally making men sick. But as devastating as prostate problems can be, there's a fourth consequence of stopping masturbation that cuts even deeper. It attacks something that no amount of medication can fully restore once it's lost. It erodes the very essence of what makes a man feel alive, vital, and connected to himself. This final consequence is the one that breaks my heart the most, because it's the one that steals a man's spirit while leaving his body technically functioning. And it's the one that most men never see coming until it's already taken hold. There's a moment in every man's decline when he looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize the person staring back at him, not because of wrinkles or gray hair. Those are just the natural badges of a life well lived. No, this is different. This is the moment when he realizes that the fire that once burned inside him, the confidence that once defined him, the very essence of his masculine identity has quietly slipped away. For George, that moment came on a Tuesday morning while shaving. He caught his own eyes in the bathroom mirror and felt absolutely nothing. No pride, no confidence, no sense of purpose, just emptiness. I used to matter, he told me during our first consultation. I used to feel like I had something to offer the world. Now I feel invisible, like I'm just taking up space until it's time to go. George was describing what I've come to recognize as the most insidious consequence of stopping masturbation in older men. The gradual erosion of masculine identity and emotional vitality. It doesn't show up on blood tests. It can't be measured with medical instruments, but it's perhaps the most devastating loss of all, because it affects how a man feels about himself at the deepest level. When you stop engaging in sexual activity, including masturbation, you don't just lose a physical function. You begin to disconnect from a fundamental part of what makes you feel alive, vital, and masculine. The neurochemical changes that occur during sexual arousal and climax, the release of dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, and other mood-regulating chemicals, play a crucial role in maintaining emotional balance and psychological well-being. Without these regular neurochemical resets, many older men begin to experience what researchers call the inability to feel pleasure or find joy in activities that once brought happiness. They become emotionally flat, disconnected, and increasingly isolated from the world around them. George had been celibate for over 3 years following his divorce. He'd convinced himself that sexual thoughts and activities were inappropriate for a man his age, that he should focus on more meaningful pursuits. But what he discovered was that by cutting himself off from this essential part of his humanity, he'd inadvertently cut himself off from joy itself. The research on this connection is profound. Studies show that regular sexual activity, including masturbation, stimulates the production of beta, a protein that promotes the growth of new brain cells and protects existing ones. It also helps regulate cortisol levels, reducing chronic stress and inflammation throughout the body. Perhaps most importantly, sexual activity maintains the neural pathways associated with pleasure, reward, and emotional connection. When these pathways aren't regularly activated, they begin to atrophy, much like unused muscles. I've had patients describe this decline in heartbreaking terms. One 71-year-old retired engineer told me, "I feel like I'm already dead, but my body hasn't figured it out yet." Another man, a former airline pilot, said, "I used to wake up excited about the day. Now I wake up wondering why I bothered." The tragedy is that many of these men assume this emotional flatness is just a normal part of aging. They accept it as inevitable, never realizing that much of their psychological decline is actually preventable. But George's story doesn't end in despair. After our consultation, he agreed to participate in what I call holistic masculine health restoration. This isn't just about resuming masturbation. It's about reconnecting with all aspects of masculine vitality, physical, emotional, and psychological. We started slowly. I educated George about the neurochemical benefits of sexual activity and helped him understand that maintaining his sexuality wasn't selfish or inappropriate. It was essential for his mental health. We addressed the shame and guilt he felt about having sexual thoughts at his age, helping him understand that desire and pleasure are gifts that don't have expiration dates. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. 3 months later, George called me with excitement in his voice. "Dr. Torres, I had the strangest experience yesterday. I was walking through the park, and I actually noticed how beautiful the flowers were. I haven't noticed beauty in anything for years." 6 months later, he started dating again. Not because he was desperately seeking companionship, but because he felt alive and valuable enough to share himself with someone else. A year later, he remarried a vibrant woman who appreciated the confident, engaged man he had become. George's restoration wasn't just about resuming sexual activity. It was about reclaiming his identity as a vital, sexual being who had every right to experience pleasure, connection, and joy, regardless of his age. The neuroscience behind this transformation is fascinating. Regular sexual stimulation helps maintain the brain's reward pathways, keeping them sensitive and responsive to pleasure. It stimulates the production of neurochemicals that combat depression and anxiety. It reinforces the neural networks associated with confidence, assertiveness, and emotional resilience. In essence, maintaining your sexuality helps maintain your sense of self. I've seen this pattern repeated dozens of times in my practice. Men who reconnect with their sexual selves, whether through masturbation, partnered intimacy, or both, experience improvements that extend far beyond physical function. They become more confident, more engaged with life, more emotionally available to their families and friends. They remember who they used to be, and they reclaim that person. But the most remarkable thing about George's story, and the stories of hundreds of other men I've treated, is that none of this decline was inevitable. The emotional numbness, the loss of joy, the fading sense of masculine identity, All of it could have been prevented with something as simple as maintaining a healthy relationship with his own sexuality. As I sit here writing this, I'm thinking about all the men who will watch this video on the Life After 65 channel. Some of you are recognizing yourselves in these stories, others are thinking about husbands, fathers, or friends who have experienced this decline. And some of you might still be skeptical about the connections I've drawn between sexual health and overall well-being. Let me be absolutely clear. Everything I've shared with you today is backed by decades of clinical experience and peer-reviewed research. The 4 consequences we've discussed: erectile dysfunction, hormonal decline, prostate problems, and emotional numbness are real, measurable, and preventable. But more importantly, they're reversible. The human body has an extraordinary capacity for healing and regeneration, even in later years. I've seen 70-year-old men regain erectile function they thought was gone forever. I've witnessed testosterone levels rebound dramatically when men resume healthy sexual practices. I've watched prostate symptoms resolve and emotional vitality return in ways that seemed impossible. The key is understanding that sexual health isn't a luxury or an indulgence. It's a necessity. Just as you wouldn't stop exercising your body or challenging your mind, you shouldn't abandon your sexuality. It's an integral part of your overall health and well-being. So what does this look like practically? How do you begin to reclaim your vitality if you've been experiencing any of the consequences we've discussed? First, let's address the elephant in the room: frequency. Based on the research and my clinical experience, I recommend that men over 60 engage in sexual activity, whether with a partner or through masturbation, at least once or twice a week. This frequency is sufficient to maintain blood flow, stimulate hormone production, keep the prostate healthy, and preserve the neurochemical pathways associated with pleasure and emotional well-being. For many men, this feels overwhelming or even impossible, especially if they've been abstinent for months or years. That's completely normal. Start slowly. The goal isn't performance, it's consistency. Even if arousal or climax doesn't come easily at first, the act of trying, of focusing on sensation and pleasure, begins to reawaken dormant pathways. Second, it's crucial to address any shame or guilt you might feel about resuming sexual activity at your age. Society has conditioned us to believe that sexuality is for the young, that older adults should be beyond such concerns. This conditioning is not only wrong, it's dangerous. Your sexuality is a fundamental part of your humanity that doesn't diminish with age. Third, understand that this journey might require patience and possibly medical support. If you've been experiencing severe erectile dysfunction, hormonal imbalances, or prostate problems, you may need professional intervention alongside lifestyle changes. That's okay. The goal is to restore function and vitality, not to prove your independence. Fourth, consider the broader context of masculine health. Regular sexual activity works best when combined with other health-promoting behaviors. Regular exercise, proper nutrition, adequate sleep, stress management, and social connection. Your sexuality doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a comprehensive approach to aging well. I want to share one final story that illustrates the transformative power of reclaiming your sexual health. 6 months ago, I received a letter from a 70-80-year-old man named Arthur. He had watched one of my presentations about sexual health in older men and decided to take action. Arthur had been celibate for 5 years following his wife's death. He'd convinced himself that his sexual life was over, that it would be disrespectful to his wife's memory to think about such things. But the loneliness and depression were overwhelming. He was considering ending his life. Instead, he decided to try one more thing. He began a gentle program of sexual self-care, combined with counseling to address his grief and guilt. Slowly, carefully, he began to reconnect with his body and his capacity for pleasure. The letter he sent me brought tears to my eyes. "Dr. Torres, I'm not the same man who was planning his funeral 6 months ago. I'm dating again. I'm traveling. I'm excited about tomorrow. You didn't just save my sex life. You saved my life. This is why I'm passionate about this work. This is why I'm willing to have uncomfortable conversations about topics that make people squirm. Because behind every statistic, every medical study, every clinical recommendation, there are real men whose lives hang in the balance. Your sexuality matters. Your pleasure matters, your vitality matters, and you have the power to protect and reclaim all of these things, regardless of your age. If you're watching this video and recognizing yourself in any of these stories, I want you to know that help is available. The Life After 65 channel is committed to providing you with honest, science-based information about all aspects of aging. We believe that your later years should be your richest years, full of vitality, purpose, and yes, pleasure. Take a moment right now to make a commitment to your future self. Commit to having an honest conversation with your doctor about sexual health. Commit to addressing any shame or guilt that's holding you back. Commit to treating your sexuality as an essential component of your overall well-being. And if this video has opened your eyes to possibilities you thought were lost forever, please let us know by typing 1 in the comments. Share your story, ask your questions, connect with other men who are on this same journey. You're not alone in this, and you don't have to navigate it alone. Subscribe to Life After 65 for more honest conversations about the health challenges and opportunities that come with aging. Hit the notification bell so you never miss content that could change your life. And please, share this video with any man in your life who might benefit from hearing this message. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your vitality. It's never too late to feel alive again. It's never too late to remember who you used to be and become that man again. Your best years aren't behind you. They're waiting for you to claim them.